in the micro experiences, they don't seem to make sense. But in the macro, everybody looks at it and they go, wow, what a beautiful thing, what a life. And I think that tells us that when we are too fixated on our micro experiences, we forget that there is a God behind the scenes who is orchestrating the macro.
Hello and welcome to another episode of our Sense in Nonsense series. Sense in Nonsense is designed to showcase people's seemingly nonsense experiences that they've gone on in this journey of life and that they've come out the other end. And when they look back, they can make sense of it. So today, we're honored to have our guest, Dr. Professor Adeyinka Adewale. Dr. Yinka Adewale, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
For the benefit of our guests, could you please tell us a bit about yourself?
Okay, so my name is Adeyinka Adewale, and for my day job, I happen to be an associate professor of leadership ethics and entrepreneurship at the Henley Business School. But I also happen to be a pastor of the Transforming Church UK, and that's pretty much what I do. And I'm living my life with a bold mission statement to mold lives and to build nations. That's what I stand for.
Interesting. So that is one person with two hats, so to speak. How do you manage to juggle both?
There's a common path.
Okay.
There's a common thread. So, of course, the easiest answer to say is, it's the grace of God. And that's true, because it is all the grace of God. So God gives us the grace to do all things. You know, as we see in the scriptures, it says God is able to make all grace abound towards us, and that we may have sufficiency in all things. So yes, and that's pretty much the story. There's also the very interesting, psychological explanation to it that the more you do stuff, the better you get at it, and then the more you do more. And also, someone also jokingly tells me that the reward of, good work is more work. So, and if you want to get anything done, just give it to a busy person. So there's always that dimension as well. That capacity just increases the more you get to do the right stuff. But beyond that, is that there is a central path. There is a common thread. Whether I'm working as a professor in a university or I am working as a pastor, the common thread is people. The passion for people, the passion to develop people, the passion to help people, the passion to nurture people. And I never get tired of that. My voice may be used in the classroom to convey knowledge and insight via a module, but the end goal of it is to shape the minds of people. I do the same thing on the pulpit, but with the Word of God. So however I want to go about it, it's the same mission, the same people, different audiences, it's the same human beings at the heart of it. Different approaches, different methods, but a common purpose.
So the objective is the same. And as I hear you say, His grace is sufficient.
Indeed.
So He gives you sufficient grace to be able to manage both and wear both hats and wear them effectively, I must say. It's interesting. As you know, our show is Sense in Nonsense, which presupposes that people have gone through the seemingly nonsense experiences in life. And I would imagine that in your role, you're no exception to that. And that you've gone through some pretty crazy challenges that at the time they looked crazy, or they looked impossible, or they just looked like, where's this coming from? But you've been able to overcome that. Could you share any of those experiences with us?
Well, I've got loads of them. But before I share some of those experiences, there is something that I learned some years ago that got me laughing but also thinking. God is a grand weaver. So what God is very good at, is an expert in this. It takes seemingly irrelevant strands of our lives, and he has a way of just weaving everything together, and then it becomes this beautiful tapestry. So I walked into a store not too long ago, and I saw these pants. Now these pants have all these patches, and I was just wondering, if you see these patches individually, they don't make any sense because they are small. You can't sew anything out of this for an adult. But in the hands of a creative, these patches were added to another fabric or the baseline of another fabric, and it created this beautiful attire that I had the privilege of purchasing. And I remember wearing it, and people were complimenting the pants. I mean, I've worn it, and people just keep complimenting the pants. And that tells a lesson. It passes a very strong message. In the micro experiences, they don't seem to make sense. But in the macro, everybody looks at it and they go, wow, what a beautiful thing, what a life. And I think that tells us that when we are too fixated on our micro experiences, we forget that there is a God behind the scenes who is orchestrating the macro. So when Moses was in Egypt, and then he was trained as a military man in Egypt and became a prince in Egypt, and then did what he did to run away from Egypt, and he went into the wilderness for 40 years, and he was now tending sheep, he would have thought his life had retrogressed, because he had gone from being a prince to becoming a shepherd. But God's approach is very powerful. God took him to the wilderness to show him where he would lead his people for 40 years, and God made him grow up in the palace where his people would be, or where his people had been. So he understood the protocol of the palace, he understood the pathway in the wilderness, and then in the last third of his life, so 40 in Egypt, 40 in the wilderness, and then from age 80 and the last 40 years of his life up to 820, he went back to Egypt to bring them into the wilderness. And so in the last 40 years, there was a combination of the first 40 and the second 40. In my life, there's so many different experiences that I've had that sort of bamboozled me, and they made me laugh. I grew up in a restaurant, in my mom's restaurant. I saw my dad run his own professional practice. I did not know I was being primed for entrepreneurship. But when I got to secondary school, I hated business studies. Then I got to the university, and guess what? I started a business. It doesn't make sense. In those little moments, I hated, at the point, I got it to a point where I loathed business because of my experience in business. But I didn't necessarily think or know that exposure, whether it was intentional or unintentional, leaves its mark. Indeed. Every exposure leaves its mark. And the power of exposure is that its deposits may not be immediately recognized, but there is always going to be a context, something in the future that triggers that deposit and brings it out of you, whether good or bad. In my case, when I got to start my first business at university, and I was wondering, how did I know these things? How am I able to sort of navigate this path? Then I reflect and realize that actually, you know what? God had been training me even though I was not aware of it. I can count so many different examples. I was saying to a group of young people earlier that when I was in the University of Lagos, there was no way you would have thought I would be the best debater on campus. It's impossible. There are people in law, people in mass comm, student union, government officials who argue, debate for a living. And then I was thrown into this whole cast where we had to have a debate, the first of its kind, I think, at the university-wide level. And my team won. And I was then given the award of the best debater at the University of Lagos.
Oh, wow.
And then I was given another experience in KPMG where my name was added to a list of people to be taken up by KPMG for a global case study competition. I had never tried that experience before. I went into it and was chosen as one of the 4 people to represent Nigeria and Africa in that competition. Now, all these things sound like amazing feats, right? But you see, the micro experiences looked great. But then, a few years ago, I found myself in a position where I was invited to do some work that involved the government of nations. But I was wondering, how did I get the audacity to say yes? And God told me, because I had trained you to walk with the unfamiliar. So your mind had been stretched.
Indeed.
Without you realizing that you are now used to the unfamiliar, and you've learned to trust me through the uncharted. So that now that you're doing other things, now you've been trained for it. So I guess my message is this: God is intentional about us. God is always several steps ahead of our present season. So when it seems not to be making sense, trust in the one who makes it all make sense. Because in the micro, the vision may be lost, but in the macro, the grand river is always at work.
Trust the process. It's interesting because I pick up a few things from just what you said there. First of all, what we say in parlance, say, don't sweat the small stuff. A lot of times we tend to focus on that small stuff because that's what we see.
Yeah.
And that leads me to another phrase which I came across and began to use, where you say people major in the minor. Don't major in the minor, because you take the minor and you turn it into everything that's going on. Meanwhile, that's the micro. And it's God that orchestrates the macro. He's in control. And as the word says, he knows the end from the beginning. So even right before it began, God knew how it would end. And you going through it, all you're seeing is the now and what doesn't seem to make sense. That's very interesting. I remember a story that you shared with us about having to host 500 students in a fellowship and going through that. And, you know, if you just touch on that slightly in terms of you were called to host that event and how you went about accomplishing it, essentially.
Yeah. So, final year university, I had this, inspiration, and the only way I knew it was from God was because I could not have thought about that kind of a grand vision myself. And it was meant to be like a legacy project, something I would do to leave a mark as I left the university. And it was very clear that God would want me to bring together young people, students on campus, pull them into one of the largest, not one of the largest auditorium we had at the time, and arguably the most prestigious at the time, because it was the newest auditorium on campus, and to fill it up and to actually inspire a generation of people. So I'm like, how on earth am I supposed to do that? There is no money. I don't have the money. The fellowship I ran didn't have the money. It was even not just for the fellowship members, because my fellowship wasn't even a sizable fellowship. It was just a fellowship of about 5 to 10 students max. There were bigger fellowships on campus at the time, run by churches or affiliated with churches, or big student fellowships. So it was small. It was a micro fellowship, if I'll say that. But then I began to do things in ways that only God could have inspired. Started knocking on doors for help. I remember partnering with another fellowship on campus who my friend was the president of at the time, and they offered me a couple of powerful speakers and they would take care of that. I took that on board. I remember one of my friends was working at the radio station, offered me some seconds of advert airtime. I took that. Again, through another friend, a decorator was given, and the decorator was like, don't worry, a decorator and photographer, we won't charge full fees now. I mean, just give us a little token. I'm like, even the little token I don't have. I was knocking on every door. I was so desperate. I wrote a proposal, walked into banks. Nobody would listen to me. One of my bosses, former bosses, then heard about what I was trying to do, because I told him, and he said, go to this person. I went to that person, and the person happened to work in a financial, outfit in Lagos at the time, and he heard me out and he was like, I need you to come speak to the board. And I went, spoke to the board with my presentation. And I remember one of the things one of them said was, your mouth is too sweet. I'm like, if you sponsor me, I will put your product in before 500 people. And they were like, are you sure you can deliver? I said, yes, I can deliver. And they said, okay, we'll give you a verdict. And when I got the verdict, it was a shocker. We will give you the money, but after the event. I'm like, okay.
Wow.
So I get it. So how am I supposed to do the event if
without
there's
the
no
money?
I've got to book the hall. At the time, the hall was 120,000 naira. In today's money, 120k is still something.
Oh yes.
Not everybody can just go and pull out 120k. And now I'm sure that hall will be
the price.
At the time, 120k. Where do I find it from? So it was looking like it was an event on a budget of about 200 and something thousand naira, and they promised to give me 300,000 naira.
Okay.
So a day to the event, I was knocking on doors, and one of my professors at the university heard about it and then gave me her salary in a check. Said, go and cash this money. Her salary was not going to cover everything, so I had to be using my head to think, okay, who can I settle? So I paid some of the vendors, bought food, did a few other things, but I couldn't pay for the venue. Me still thinking there will be a miracle. So I couldn't sleep that night. I was tossing and turning in bed thinking, I'm about to do the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. The following morning, courage. I was nearly peeing my pants. 7 a.m. the following morning, the decorator calls me on the phone, goes, I'm at the venue. I'm like, and it's like, the door is open. I'm like, yes. He said, can I go in? I said, please go in. He said the security man came around and asked me if we had a venue, an event today, and I told him yes. I said, yes, we have an event here. I'm not lying, because I booked the venue, but I just did not pay for it, and I shouldn't have had access to the venue because I hadn't paid for it. And lo and behold, later the afternoon, the hall was full up. The sponsors showed up. The event was a success. They tapped me on the back. I'm like, oh boy, you outdid yourself on this one, and gave me a bank draft for 300,000 naira at the time. I will never forget. It was 300,000 naira intercontinental bank draft, and there was an intercontinental bank on campus at the time. So I went to cash the money, paid off the woman who had given me a part of her salary. Right. Went back to the vendors who the Senate building at the time to go pay off for the venue. They're like, how did you do the venue without paying paid? I said, are you complaining about what has gone past, or are you happy that I had the integrity to come and pay you? So take the money. Let's not argue on how it happened. Let's just say God's hands was in this. I paid that off, and I had some change left, 60,000 I remember. So the event cost 240k, and I was going to go spend the money to eat shawarma and enjoy my life, because I worked for this. I deserve it. And on my way, I sense the Lord say to me, you will not touch the money. It's not yours. I'm like, the devil is in my. Whose money is
of
it?
course.
After all the work, I will not chop out of this money. And I knew immediately it was the voice of God, and I'd been given the permission to put it into a scholarship fund, which I then did, and gave 6,000 naira. At the time, our school fees was 6,000 naira. Federal universities were charging 6,000 naira at the time. So I picked two students. I'm in a course that's 5 years. I studied a course that's 5 years. So I picked students from year 1 to year 5, 2 indigents in each of those levels, and presented a cash, 6,000 in 10 envelopes. And I presented it to them and gave away all the money.
Wow.
And walked away.
Wow. How ridiculous does it get? You undertook an event without having any money to go through it. It talks about the power of connections. I mean, underlying it all, there is faith. There's no doubt about it. And it's believing that you were sent. That this was a mission that you were sent on.
Absolutely.
And you took one step in front of the other and carried on nevertheless. This is where a lot of people would have given up. Say, I don't have the money, I can't do it, I don't have this, I don't have that. And that seems to be, even today, that seems to be the emphasis a lot of people have on life. That I can't do this, I can't do that. And that just reminds me of what one of my mentors says. He says, a lot of people want to do things and say they don't have the resources. That you see, your problem is not one of resources, it's one of resourcefulness.
Exactly.
That how resourceful can you get in the pursuit of that endeavor? Okay, now in the multi hats that you wear, I note that you've written a number of books. Some academic, some to impact lives. One of them is this, The Parable of the Baker. I think, was this your first publication?
Yep, it was my first book.
Indeed.
First non-academic book.
Right. This says the lessons in purpose, timing, process, and success. I would encourage you to get this book. The lessons here are gold mine. Then after that, there's your most recent publication. This is The Wisdom of 40 Summers. Stories of grace, grit, and growth. Can you tell us a little bit about this book?
So The Wisdom of 40 Summers is a compendium of 40 wisdom keys that I have acquired along the way. So my life is full of so many stories, and I'm just so grateful to God for the ability to live introspectively in a way, because some of the stories could have been lost if one was just carrying on. We're all made up of different stories.
Yes.
We're all made up of different stories. But in my instance, I knew there was a season of my life that God was intentionally shaping me, and He is still working on me. And those seasons just came with some ridiculously great stories that I'm just thinking, this is too good to be true. So what I've done here is that, knowing my background, where I came from, and where God has brought me to, is there a blueprint of some sort that can help another person who may come from a similar background or navigating similar circumstances? Is there a blueprint that they can, glean from to help them get to wherever God may be taking them to? And that's what this project was about. So I pieced together amazing insights. So the compendium of stories from my life that have defined me, but then 40 wisdom keys that came through it. And it covers quite a few themes: family, relationships, adversity, failure, connections, and so many of these other, broad themes that I believe have sort of defined key seasons of my life.
Interesting. The Wisdom of 40 Summers by Adeyinka Adewale, Ph.D. I would highly recommend that you get a copy of this book. It will change your life. Where can they get a copy of this book?
Amazon.
This book is available on Amazon, so please get your copy. So, Dr. Adeyinka, can you tell us one truth, that something that you found to be true in this your journey of life that you can hold on to?
Your perspectives will affect your choices, and your choices will affect your outcome. No matter what you're going through, your worldview is the foundation of your transformation. So if you don't change your worldview, you can't change your choices, and if you can't change your choices, you can't change your outcome. So the power of that is that if your perspective through which you're seeing the things around you does not evolve in a positive light, you are more likely to continue to make wrong choices, or make choices that will shortchange you. And I'll punctuate it with a small example. When Joseph was sold to slavery by his own blood brothers, and he was in Potiphar's house, there was every reason for him to be bitter and not take on the joy of, I'm now in a new space, I'm glad to be alive, at least let me continue to do whatever I'm doing. That's not to say Joseph wasn't hurt.
Yeah, sure.
But the Bible said God was with Joseph, and God caused everything he did to prosper. So Joseph began to rise. People who don't give their best don't rise. So he was giving his best in spite of the betrayal he just went through. And then he was further betrayed. The master's wife lied that he had tried to sleep with her, and it landed him in jail. So he went from being dad's favorite to being into the pit, and from the pit went into the Potiphar's house, and then from there landed in jail. Again, I mean, I'm looking at it through the lens of a young Nigerian like myself, who will say village people, because I mean, what kind of life can a man have to be connected to so many series of unfortunate events? That's what we will have thought.
Village people.
But then he got into, that's what we'll say, village people. Then he got into the prison, and then leadership found him again in the prison. Responsibility found him again in the prison, and then he began to share his gifts. He began to serve through his adversity. And that's one of the powerful things I've learned, that I'm not saying that we shouldn't aspire to get healed, but oftentimes when we're too focused on ourselves, we miss out on bigger pictures and bigger things in life. Joseph served despite his pain, and he landed in the palace as a result of it. So, perspective. If you don't understand what is going on around you, seek God for fresh perspective. The perspective you hold will influence the choices you make. And once you make your choices, the outcome will follow suit.
Absolutely. Interesting. It's interesting because the two things that I take from that. One, where people say, who said it? Was it Albert Einstein that said, you can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. That's one. And one of my mentors also said this, that I believe it was Jim Rohn, that when you change the things you look at, or is it when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So the power of perspective. So when you begin to see it in a different light, you get a different outcome.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Very interesting. So in this, your journey of life, what would your future self thank you for?
It's a great question. Having the heart to serve people.
Interesting.
I found service to be one of the most powerful keys to living a fulfilled life. Service is so powerful that it has the ability to give us 100% of everything we seek out of life. Through service, you meet people. Through service, you touch lives. Through service, you grow. Through service, you discover yourself. Through service, you deploy your gifts. Through service, more is given to you. There is just this amazing power of service. And the fact that God helped me discover it early through a web of relationships, a web of guides, my parents, my dad, my mom, they may not even know, through mentors, through different webs of relationships, all of those experiences and the discovery of the gift of service, I can serve anybody. I'm not too big to serve anybody. I'm not too big to stoop low to serve anybody. And then I discovered it was Jesus' secret as well.
Absolutely.
So the Bible said that he put it this way: in the kingdom of God, he said, you hear it in the world, they lord it over them, but it shall not be so amongst you. And the power of that is that he who wants to lead the greatest among you must be the least. He who wants to lead must be the ones to serve. So it sounds crazy. Again, it doesn't make sense. It's absolute nonsense.
Absolutely.
I want to be the leader, you're telling me to be the servant. I want to be the head, you're telling me to remain at the bottom. So how do I live? And then it goes on to go this way. If you want to live in the kingdom of God, you have to die. So to live, you die.
Yes.
To go up, you have to
Life
come
is
down.
death,
Except
yes.
the grain of wheat falls down to the ground and dies, it abideth not. Unless you go down, you can't come up. So when we plant seed, until the seed takes root downward, until it takes root downwards, it can't bear fruit upwards. So it's down before you go up. It is serve to lead. Everything just seems the other way around.
Opposites.
And discovering that for me will be one of the greatest things I believe my future self will thank me for.
Interesting.
But also by the grace of God that it came in a time where I was able to deploy it, to see its power, and to embed it into my core value system.
Interesting. This has been a very interesting discussion with Dr. Adeyinka Adewale. Thank you for being a guest on this program. From what we've gleaned, this is huge. This is plenty to try and summarize. It's a story of obedience, hearing, obeying, with an underlying element of faith and trusting, and then learning through the process, and also deploying the learning. And I see here that learning can be summarized in having a perspective. So your perspective will determine and shape your reality, really.
Yes, sir.
What you see is what you become.
Yes, sir.
In essence. And you've learned that at an early age. For me, that's very crucial, because I see a lot of people going through life and not passing through the right, rite of passage. When they should do things at certain points in their lives, they don't do it, and then they maybe get to go and do it at a later time. But that's because they haven't learned. And it is my prayer that shows like this, stories like this, can help people to glean learning and to put it into practice and to deploy and to change their lives. So thank you again, Dr. Adeyinka, for this session.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is Sense in Nonsense with your host, Jacob Shomwe. Until we meet again, bye for now.